the IAEA is the agency that is monitoring the Iranis and says that they're ignoring it. The human rights abuses are unbelievable, with the highest death penalty rate in the world. And, of course, their savage, I shouldn't use the word savage. Yes, I should. Savage put down of the protesters who protested the fraud election that they had in June of 2009. They have continued to support terrorists, particularly Hezbollah. They have called for the genocide of Israel, which contradicts the very meaning and really, in many ways, the very credo of the founding of the United Nations. So a number of people are wondering whether or not we should have Ahmadinejad at the UN. And while they're not trying to limit his freedom of speech, they're not going to limit their own. A big protest scheduled for next week. And we're going to talk to the individual who's organizing that press conference and that rally, Chris DeVito. He's the director for outreach for Iran 180. And what he says when he writes in the Daily News is that it's time to give Ahmadinejad hell. Now, I went to a number of demonstrations about Ahmadinejad before I became governor and afterward, but I think that the fervor of this particular demonstration with United States Senator Kirsten Gillibrand calling for the UN to basically censure Iran and Ahmadinejad through a resolution. Why should people have to get up and walk out of the chamber when he speaks? Why don't they throw him out of the chamber and let him speak outside? All right. Well, I'm glad I never did any of this stuff when I was governor. Aren't you, Dave? Aren't you glad that I didn't act that way?
I know I am.
Yes, definitely. Most definitely.
Okay, good. All right. Well, we'll be back to talk to Chris DeVito and to you at 800-321-0710 right after these messages. Right now, we're going to find out what Chris DeVito thinks. He is the executive director, or actually director of outreach for Iran 180, trying to get the Iranian government to turn 180 degrees around. Chris, I think the real point of the rally is not really even to get Iran to change 1 degree, because clearly they won't. But it really is a call for people to make use of their First Amendment rights in a place where we have them, to really shame this government for the lies and the anguish that they have perpetrated on an entire globe over the last few years.
That's perfectly put, Governor, and it's a pleasure to be with you. What we're trying to do at Iran 180 over the next week is use those First Amendment rights. We understand that we have very little choice about Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's presence here in our city and in our country, but we do have the ability and I think the responsibility to let him know how we think about the policies that he's perpetrated against his own people, against people in the region, and against people all over the world. And that's why we're running this unwelcome campaign that we're running. We're making use of both social media and some good old-fashioned protesting to let him know that he's not welcome here in our city. People can support us on Twitter using the hashtag unwelcome. And Mr. Governor, as you put it very eloquently a couple years ago at an Iran 180 press conference in a very similar circumstance, there is another Iran. And that's who we're speaking up for today as well. And it's an Iran that wants to have free and open elections, that wants all the benefits of the democracy that we here in the United States benefit from. And we're, standing in solidarity with those people as well.
Senator Gillibrand, Congress members Nadler, Engel, and McCarthy, the state and city controllers DiNapoli and Liu, Speaker Quinn, Borough President Stringer, Public Advocate de Blasio, and former Controller Bill Thompson, all of the announced mayoral candidates. Rob Astorino, a very effective county executive up in Westchester, will be there. The state Senate will include Senator Liz Krueger, who's from Manhattan, and the state assembly will include Member Grace Ming, who's running for Congress in Queens right now. You've got quite an array of Republicans and Democrats, of urban and suburban supporters, and but I think that the whole message that you just underscored is one that helps us focus attention on why the Iranian experience has been so tragic, because Iran, which is a country of 79 million people and one of the 20 largest countries in the world, is currently under siege from a few fanaticists who are close to getting their hands on nuclear weapons and really could end the whole world in an internecine conflict, because they are driven by some, interpretation they have of what their mission is on this planet.
Absolutely, Governor. And I think, here at Iran 180, what we want to encourage is, a fundamental change in behavior on the part of the Iranian regime. We want them to end their pursuit of nuclear weapons. We want them to come into compliance with the demands of the international community and, the demands of the United Nations, the body before which Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is going to spew his vitriol next Wednesday. We want them to come into compliance with international norms on human rights. And, I think that the most effective way for everyday Americans to become involved in advancing these causes is to speak out. And they can do that, on our website, www.iran180.org. They can sign the petition that, gives voice to the reasons that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is unwelcome here in our city. And as you said, we have the leading lights of New York City politics, New York State politics, giving voice to these very same principles and these values, because this is a no-brainer. This crosses political party lines. This is a genuinely bipartisan issue, and this is something that I think is easy for people to understand. Now,
put a time limit on these folks, Chris, because they didn't get to speak at the September 11th commemoration, so some of them have got a lot to say. But let me just underscore something that you wrote in the Daily News yesterday. So apparently, one of the games that they play in Iran is that right before Ahmadinejad comes to the UN, they release somebody who's on death row, which isn't hard because a lot of people are. And they do it as an act of humanitarianism to try to convince the other Arab nations that they're really not so bad.
Sure. I mean, this is something that we've seen numerous times in the past. I know when you gave remarks for us a couple years ago, you spoke about the hikers, the American hikers who were currently being imprisoned in Iran at the time. Iran, that very same year, pulled a similar where they released, one of those hikers, a token of goodwill, and basically in an effort to kind of improve their image before the world, before the UN General Assembly. I think it's important that people don't, take the bait there, that people remember that the Iranian regime is currently executing more people per capita than any country in the world. They're doing it for things like drug charges. They're doing it for things like people's sexuality. They're doing it because of things like people's religious worldviews. This is simply unconscionable and unacceptable to anyone of good conscience and who thinks about these things in good faith.
And I love how you have the UN welcome is really unwelcome, the way it's spelt in the press release, and is some creativity that helps draw attention to what is a very serious issue, and one that I think many of us, when we came, we were agonized that we had to do it, because just the mention of Ahmadinejad's name seems to feed his rather warped ego. And so this is just, at the same time, a good opportunity for us as a country who've come a long way since we were founded to really start to pretty much give these opportunities and rights to most people in the land.
Absolutely, and I think that, as you said before, this is a perfect opportunity for us to exercise those rights that we enjoy and to let him know just how we feel about the policies that he pursues, both internationally and against his own people. I think that there is broad consensus internationally that on both the nuclear and human rights fronts, this regime is out of step with the world.
Chris DeVito has been our guest, and he's the director for outreach, Iran 180. The dream that maybe Iran will be a country where individuals will be able to live and express themselves, that whatever their sexual preferences, whatever their views are, whatever their political alignment is, that they will not be tormented and tortured as they are right now. And probably the worst example of us standing pat when we should have said or done something was in 2009 when they protested a sham election and people were murdered right in the streets where they were protesting. So, Chris, tell our listeners where the rally is and what time.
So we will be at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza next week on the 26th. We'll be there from 11 to 1 p.m. But the rally is ongoing online as well, and we encourage you, if you're on Twitter, to use the hashtag unwelcome and to tweet at us at Iran180. You can also go and sign the petition at www.iran180.org. Lend your voice to this movement and let Mahmoud Ahmadinejad what you think about his presence here.
Well, thank you for that. Now, Chris, I'm out of government now, but I can still be helpful. If you want, I'll come early and help set up chairs and help put the stage up, maybe dust off the podium or do a mic check for all those anxious speakers. But in all seriousness, in any way I can be helpful, I volunteer.
Well, we really appreciate it, and you've been a tremendous, help getting the word out just here right now. And I know that you'll be thinking about and talking about this issue to all the people you know over the next couple days, and giving support to what we're up to.
Sure thing. Thanks for joining us. All right, we'll be back. There's an expression of the First Amendment I think that we can all agree is apropos, but there are others.